Now on RTE1, in the last in the current series, reporter Paul Murphy highlights fuel smuggling operators in Primetime Investigates.
With customs posts and British Army checkpoints gone, the border has become virtually invisible, making it easier for smugglers and even more profitable.
A number of people got phenomenally wealthy by diesel smuggling, and phenomenally wealthy very quickly.
Fuel fraud in Northern Ireland is big business, worth about €200 million each year.
We're all told that crime shouldn't pay, and it certainly shouldn't seem to pay, but it clearly does pay, even with the cab going after you and getting some of your assets from you.
Fuel smuggling has long been associated with IRA fundraising, but most of the main smugglers are straightforward criminals.
The peace process has gone on, but this crime has continued regardless.
Some call it a victimless crime, but those who make huge profits out of smuggling oil use whatever means necessary to protect their interests. They flout the law, and they have little fear of getting caught.
These criminal gangs, they mean business, they make a lot of money out of this. They're not going to give up this practice easily, so they do not take lightly to people poking their nose into their business.
Can you tell us at all how much money you've made out of fuel smuggling over the years, Mr. Hanratty?
No, I can't count.
Early morning near Castleblaney on the Monaghan-Armagh border. By the lakes, it's peaceful, an unlikely backdrop to a major criminal industry. It's widely known what's going on around here, but few are brave enough to speak.
I think in the past there has been a sort of culture of smuggling in certain areas, and it's very hard to break that tradition.
It's just symptomatic of a mindset that exists along certain sections of the border where people really wouldn't bother getting up in the morning unless there was a fiddle to play of some description. Down the years that was cattle, it was smuggling barley, the flavour of the month at the minute is smuggling oil.
This looks like just a farmyard with high walls. In fact, it's home to Longfield Oil, one of the busiest fuel depots in Ireland. And although it will shortly be open for another day of business, it doesn't even have a licence to trade oil. Situated in County Monaghan, just metres from the Armagh border, customs and police know it well as a smuggler's yard. But it operates with apparent impunity. Around here, it seems, the smugglers do as they please.
Very difficult to stop it. It's been going for over 10 years, and if you bear in mind that the police and the army were in the border areas for a long time with that, and it didn't actually stop the smuggling. Now it's organised crime and it's big business, and those who are involved in it are making lots of money.
It works like this. Oil shipped into the Republic is collected at ports by tanker. Southern excise taxes are paid and the fuel is brought to depots near the border, all entirely legal. Then smaller tankers arrive from Northern Ireland. They fill up and take the oil back across the border. These are smugglers. They don't pay Northern Irish excise taxes, which are much higher than those in the south. That saves them a packet. Smugglers control a huge share of the Northern Irish fuel market, selling 1/4 of all its diesel and petrol. Depots like Longfield are middlemen. Today, the first delivery is a tanker from major fuel distributor Morgan Fuels. The operation is so routine that the driver even lets himself in. Michael once worked as a driver for a company involved in fuel smuggling. Because of safety fears, he would only speak to Primetime anonymously.
I worked for a reputable firm. You seen things going on. You never just opened your mouth. Everything was, you do as you're told. You see nothing and say nothing. Delivering ordinary home heating, oil and petrol and stuff like that there's not big money in it. Definitely not big money in it. You're just getting a living. If you done it legally, on 20,000 litres, you'd be looking £400 to £600 profit on a load. If you done it illegally, you could be taking anything up to £2,000, £2,500. The money is in smuggling.
It's usually impossible to tell how much a smuggler's yard sells. But in June 2001, customs officials raided Longfield Oil near Castleblaney and struck gold. There, Primetime has learned, they discovered 2 sets of sales books. One set for the taxman showed only modest sales. The other set was for actual sales. Only 1 litre in 20 was going through the books. Based on these figures, Longfield sells over 40 million litres of fuel per year, almost all to smugglers. This would amount to 5% of the official northern market for diesel and petrol. At a conservative estimate, the operation brings in €6 million per year for its operators, including Seamus Duffy and Eugene Hanratty, pictured here.
A number of people who have got phenomenally wealthy by diesel smuggling, and phenomenally wealthy very quickly. They have developed a swagger. They believe that they are untouchable.
I don't think it's individuals. I think this is real organised crime in a big way. There's a lot of money behind it. There's a lot of money in the investment on tankers, also on storage tanks and things of that nature. So it's not just the ordinary small smuggler. It's a big crime.
In a 6-month investigation, Primetime filmed other smugglers' depots, such as this one, about a mile from Longfield Oil. It's a small depot, but judging by the number of tankers we saw coming and going, it sells over 300,000 litres of fuel per week. Run by Armagh businessman Malachy Malloy, the depot, like Longfield, has no oil trader's licence. Primetime asked the Revenue Commissioner's Investigations Unit why unlicensed yards such as these are allowed to operate.
They can be closed down provided we can get the necessary evidence on them. Don't forget that these individuals or companies will be dealing entirely off record, so they would have a front which would be a small legal operation simply to cover their activities, but the bulk of their illicit activities will be entirely off record.
We watched Malloy's yard get busy as northern registered tankers arrive to fill up. Tankers leaving the yard are accompanied by scout cars, which drive ahead to look out for customs or police checkpoints.
The boys is at it full time would have a ringer car out in front of them at all times, and they clear the path the whole way up.
These are scout cars?
Yes.
And how are they in contact with each other?
I'd say CB or else mobile, more likely mobiles. Because you know yourself, customs would have the police and all sitting ahead 2-3 miles away. So they'd have the whole place circled. So there'd need to be quite a distance in between the two to get to see customs so the boys could shoot off.
The scout car leaves Malloy's depot. Minutes later, a tanker, which has just filled up, follows. Primetime followed the tanker to the border and across to Waters Garage in Cullowville, County Armagh, just 3 miles down the road. This is the smuggle. The law is broken because Northern excise duty is not paid. And if it's bought cheap, a garage can sell cheap, undercutting rivals.
These people should never be seen as Robin Hood type characters. They are pushing legitimate small retailers who sell petrol on the northern side of the border out of business.
Staff told us this garage belonged to Padraig Waters, a prominent local businessman and director of the Monaghan County Enterprise Fund. When Primetime contacted Mr. Waters to ask if his garage was buying illegal fuel, he said the garage wasn't his. We checked with the company's office. According to their records, Padraig Waters is a director, shareholder and secretary of the company operating the premises. Mr. Waters declined to be interviewed by Primetime. It's a big earner for such a short journey. By illegally avoiding excise tax, the profit on this 3-mile run is over €4,000 for a full load of petrol, and for diesel it would be over €6,000.
In Northern Ireland, the extent of smuggling is certainly happening and certainly continuing, but obviously there are still key suppliers of smuggled fuels, And I think the point to make also to the consumer is that smuggled fuels just doesn't happen along the border. It's a province-wide issue.
The border has always been a shop window for price differences between north and south. Today, drivers come south for cheaper fuel. It used to be the other way around.
Here along the border, there have been petrol price wars before, but the present one looks like breaking all the records. A gallon of petrol north of the border now costs between 10 and 20 pence cheaper than down south. This means that a driver who nips over the border to fill his tank can save between £1 and £2 every visit. What's going to happen in the long run? Will they lower the prices south of the border?
I think it'll have to come to that, yeah.
Prices did change. In 1993, the UK government started raising petrol and diesel taxes well beyond the rate of inflation. Within a few years, Northern Ireland went from having some of the cheapest fuel in Europe to some of the most expensive. It had turned full circle. For garages in Northern Ireland, the market slumped. Even though car ownership rose by 30% over 10 years, petrol and diesel sales fell by 17%. As northern motorists fill with southern fuel, it's a fully legitimate windfall for garages in parts of Donegal, Cavan, Monaghan and Louth.
Maybe saving £5 to £10 on each fill up, you know. So it is worth the while. It's not that far to come down, so.
It's a hell of a huge difference, especially for a person that's running 5 or 6 lorries. You're talking a massive saving. You know, if you're near the border at all, to run down the extra 20 miles and 20 miles back, like, it saves you a while of money.
All you have to do is go and look at all the registrations. Look at all the northern registrations and you'll soon find out. Yeah, about 75% of our business would come from Northern Ireland.
The biggest bonanza, however, has been for smugglers. Oil smuggling is widely believed to be carried out at night time and on small country roads. Even the most recent Garda PSNI report on cross-border organised crime portrays smuggled oil as something concealed in the back of trucks. In fact, most oil is smuggled by tanker and in broad daylight.
Just do it during the daytime. I've seen it being stopped by the Brits, coming up early in the morning, you know, before 8 o'clock. Where are you coming from? Home. Where are you heading? To work. And like, you may be sitting with £4,000 or £5,000 cash in your cab and away off you go, like.
There is very little apparent customs activity in the area because the customs men are civil servants. It's not part of their job to get beaten. It's not even part of their job to get threatened. And this is the sort of thing that we're talking about which smugglers would do.
Whatever the reason, Northern Irish customs are not very effective. Although the number of officials working to combat fuel fraud jumped 7-fold to over 160 by 2001, convictions actually fell, from 15 to an average of just 3 per year.
Usually the oil boys know the day in advance to where the customs are stopping, so you know where you don't go, and you know where you do go, like. The boys would know what's going on.
This is a well-established practice. Customs on both sides of the border successfully avoided addressing it for the past 14, 15 years.
Like any industry, smugglers depend on a reliable supply. Legitimate supply is guaranteed at oil terminals such as those at the complex at Dublin Port. Smugglers don't stand out here. Like everyone else, they pay Irish excise duty on their cargo before they leave the port.
The best place to hide the tree is in a forest. You know, if you mix in the chancy trucks with the straight ones, the chances of them getting apprehended are pretty slim. The volumes of traffic that are now crossing the border legitimately is quite phenomenal. So, you know, to hide the dodgy ones in among the legit ones isn't that difficult.
Take this tanker, a regular customer at Dublin Docks. It operates from Hoey Fuels, a South Armagh company owned by John Hoey, a convicted smuggler. This tanker carries out daylight robbery, simply collecting the oil in Dublin and bringing it straight across the border. No scout cars, no middleman, and no northern duty paid. Primetime monitored this tanker. Typically, it made 3 journeys daily, filling up in Dublin docks at Tedcastle's Oil Products or Statoil, and driving direct to Hoey's yard across the border in Culleval. Each journey is illegal, but extremely lucrative. This tanker holds 36,000 litres. Were it to fill up with diesel in the north, Hoey Fuels would pay almost €29,000 in excise tax. In Dublin, the excise charge is only €13,000. The smuggle saves over €15,000 on each trip. On 3 trips a day, this tanker saves Hoey's up to €250,000 each week, or about €12 million every year. We called to John Hoey's home in Carrickmacross, County Monaghan.
Hello?
Hello, I'm looking for John Hoey, please.
You're looking for John Hoey?
Yeah.
Okay, who is it?
Paul Murphy.
Paul Murphy.
Yeah. John, how are you? Paul Murphy from RTE Primetime. John, just a few questions about your smuggling business, please. Mr. Hoey, just a few questions about your smuggling business, please. We later wrote to John Hoey asking for an interview, but he declined any comment.
The South is letting this go because the crime is not taking place in their jurisdiction. The Republic is making a fortune from smuggling.
A very large fortune. Because excise tax on fuel is usually paid at the ports, the Irish Exchequer makes about €160 million per year from fuel fraud.
We're, in a sense, complicit in that fraud by taking our share of the profit here and turning a blind eye to the smuggling.
Organised crime gangs who are behind fuel smuggling operate on both sides of the border, and therefore I don't see any person in the government, north or south, could say that this in any way does not have an impact. It does.
That impact is felt far away in Westminster, where the Northern Ireland Affairs Committee has produced reports on fuel smuggling. Committee Chair Patrick Cormack feels the Irish Republic is not doing enough.
I think that people put their finger on it yourself when you talk about the fact that the South is a beneficiary and a financial beneficiary, and therefore perhaps there isn't the incentive.
With respect, I think it's something that you would want to address to our colleagues in the north rather than to me. But I mean, ultimately, the fraud would be on the UK Exchequer. I think our first duty here is to protect our own Exchequer.
And if it's ill-gotten gains, no responsible, respectable government should be happy to be the beneficiary of ill-gotten gains.
We wanted to ask Justice Minister Brian Lenihan and Northern Ireland Security Minister Paul Goggins what they plan to do about fuel smuggling. Both declined to be interviewed for this programme. We also asked Northern Irish Customs and Excise for an interview. They also said no. So did the PSNI and An Garda Síochána. It's the most serious cross-border crime, but nobody wants to talk about it. And what about the major oil firms? After all, it's their product that ends up in smugglers' yards.
The oil companies aren't going to kill the goose that laid the golden egg. They're not going to destroy a market for themselves.
I would say that the oil companies have a duty of care as to who they do business with. That said, they're there to obviously make profits from their operations. But I think that duty of care goes with the territory as well.
Do you think that the eye on the profit margin wins out, and that they turn a blind eye?
I think it may depend on which oil companies, I would say that the majority of them would certainly be, I'd say they would be conscious as to who they would do business with. We have had tip-offs in the past, where an oil company was suspicious as to about particular customers.
Over the course of our investigation, Primetime filmed tankers bound for Hoey Fuels fill up in Dublin port at Statoil and Tedcastle's, known as Top Oil, before smuggling across the border. Top Oil declined to be interviewed, but told Primetime in a statement that it had no evidence of fuel smuggling taking place at its facilities, and that it couldn't comment on its dealings with individual customers. Statoil also declined to be interviewed for this programme. But because we had seen a Statoil tanker in Malloy's Monaghan depot on September 14th, we asked if they actually deliver to this unlicensed yard. In response, Statoil said in a statement, all of our commercial fuel customers are subject to normal commercial screening before we commence deliveries. We did talk to another big distributor, Maxol, which has long been a vocal opponent of oil smuggling.
What we would do as a company, again, we would make sure that we are supplying to people that we have vetted and that we know and what we believe to be, dealing in legitimate fuels. What they then do to whoever they supply thereafter, and if those people then decide to do with it, there's very little that we can do to actually control that.
But a main supplier to the Longfield smuggling yard draws regularly from Maxol's Drogheda depot. Morgan Fuels, run by Hugh Morgan, a convicted smuggler, is not breaking any law by selling to Longfield. But Longfield is a smuggler's yard. We asked if a leading brand like Maxol has any obligation to check where its fuel is going. They supply one of the yards, one of the smugglers' yards.
This is not for airing on television now, gentlemen.
I'm just asking you.
No, this is not for putting on television now, I'm being serious. I'm not prepared to talk about customers on this.
Bearing in mind that the product has to come from the wholesalers in the Republic of Ireland, the oil companies there are not losing any money. No questions are being asked. I don't think there are enough investigations being done in the Republic on that particular thing.
So the South is basically turning a blind eye to organised crime?
Yeah.
Several industry figures told Primetime they suspected a broader political motive. That authorities fear that any heavy security clampdown in the Republican heartland of South Armagh could provoke a backlash against the state and the peace process.
I think one has to recognise that government has had different priorities in the context of Northern Ireland over the last 2 or 3 years. And now that we have achieved what has been achieved, the peace process has gone on, but this crime has continued regardless.
There may well have been other reasons on the minds of politicians that were to them more important. They were prepared to sacrifice a legitimate industry for serving transport fuels to motorists in Northern Ireland and to watch it taken over by the activities of illegal gangs. It's a funny political sort of scene that allows that to happen, isn't it?
There is a price to pay, north and south, when smuggling gangs are given free rein. In part 2, we look at the dirtiest end of fuel fraud and see how smugglers will let nothing, including the law, get in their way.
A laundering plant is run on army discipline. If you break a code, you are dead.
Join Michael Lester live to celebrate the drama and excitement from the 2007 sporting calendar. The RTE Sports Awards 2007, Friday at 9:35 on RTE 1.
Buying goods and services is part of daily life. The National Consumer Agency is an independent government agency, here to provide information on consumer rights and to enforce consumer law. So, if something goes wrong with anything you've bought, or if you have a concern or simply need information, just phone us on 1890 432 432 or visit consumerconnect.ie. The National Consumer Agency, putting consumers first.
When there's just no time to be tired and you need to keep up with each busy day, ask your pharmacist for Pharmaton, because Pharmaton capsules have a unique formulation of 17 vitamins and minerals and ginseng G115. They're clinically proven to tackle tiredness, helping you rediscover your inner energy and vitality. Don't let tiredness get in the way. Take Pharmaton once a day. Beat the tiredness and bring on the day.
The Centre of Entertainment Excellence has something for everyone this Christmas. Like Vio laptops from €799. Digital cameras from €159, MP3 video Walkmans from €99, and MP3 DJ headphones from €19. Happy Christmas from your local Sony centre. More Sony for your money.
Run further, play harder, last longer. Spend €100 and get a free €15 voucher. Only at Lifestyle Sports, where sport lives.
The very best of MTUSA. Music never looked better.
You know, I really love this time of year. If you're like me, you'll want the very best. That's why I recommend the Dunnes Stores Simply Better range. This beautiful Simply Better bronze free-range turkey is delicious. And just look at this tender baked boneless ham. Or for something different for Christmas dinner, try a succulent strip line of Irish beef. And don't forget the Simply Better vegetables and of course the Christmas sprouts. So make it a Simply Better Christmas with fabulous food from Dunnes Stores.
Dunnes Stores. Always better value.
For the power to silence screaming pain, take Anadin Maximum Strength. Anadin, the power to stop pain.
Love is a treasure. Trésor. Lancôme.
This is James Blunt with his beautiful new album, All the Lost Souls. 10 new tracks featuring the forthcoming single, Same Mistake.
But when it is quiet,
The stunning Carry You Home. And the smash hit 1973.
1973.
James Blunt, All the Lost Souls, out now.
Add sparkle to any occasion. Jacobs Creek Sparkling Rosé and Chardonnay Pinot Noir.
Make their Christmas magic with high-spec phones for music, gaming and video. From only €129 from Vodafone. Just call in store today. Vodafone. Make the most of now.
Back at Longfield Oil, a white transit van crosses from a field in County Armagh to Longfield's premises in County Monaghan. It's an unusual way to cross the border, but this isn't an ordinary van. A worker fills a green tanker from storage tanks in the yard. It's then driven to the other side of the yard. The transit van parks alongside. It's been specially adapted to carry illicit fuel. Behind Longfield's high walls, workers fill up fuel tanks hidden in the back of the van. When the transit is full, the worker wipes diesel spray off the van's side panel. The transit moves off, its place taken by a battered 17-year-old Hiace. This is the most dangerous end of fuel fraud. We showed this footage to Ray Holloway, a long-time lobbyist against illegal fuel.
This is very much like the early days of how a lot of the product was distributed, the washed product of diesel. I think anyone who would handle petrol like that would have a very short career. So without doubt, it's diesel. What it could cause is a traffic accident because you have a tank of liquid which is probably not divided, so it doesn't stop the liquid moving around inside the tank, and therefore it would make the vehicle very unstable. The suspension of that vehicle is not meant for the load that it's carrying.
Not only is the Hiace van a death trap, Primetime has learned it isn't even insured. For Longfield Oil, the law doesn't seem to apply. Eugene Hanratty has been involved in running Longfield Oil for 2 decades. During that period, he has been before the courts many times, but he has never been jailed. Last year, He was charged with false imprisonment and threatening to kill PSNI officers. The case was dropped in April. His luck with the law goes a long way back. In 1988, when customs officials tried to confiscate a tanker carrying smuggled oil at Longfield, he offered violent resistance. According to court documents, a Garda was punched in the face and bitten on the hand by Eugene Hanratty, who also attempted to push a customs officer off the top of a tanker. He was convicted of assaulting the Garda, but got just a suspended jail sentence at Castleblaney District Court. He got off lightly, again and again. The following year, he rammed a customs vehicle with a tanker during a smuggling raid on Longfield. He was fined just £1,000. On another occasion, he was caught smuggling heating oil into the south. Again, he was fined. And in 1996, he rammed his tanker into a customs car at a checkpoint. For this, he was fined just £250 for damaging the property of the Minister of Finance, and a further £1,000 for failing to comply with the request of a customs official. That fine was later cut in half.
I can't say that we're always 100% happy with the penalties that are given out by the courts. In many cases, we see suspended sentences being given, for instance. Now, some might argue that that is still a jail sentence, even though it is suspended by the courts. Sometimes it's hard to understand some of these sentences.
Primetime invited Eugene Hanratty for an interview to answer the many questions our investigation raised about smuggling. He declined. We caught up with him in Clones on his way to a football match. So Eugene Hanratty, RT Primetime here. We want to ask you about your involvement in fuel smuggling. Mr. Hanratty, how long have you been involved in fuel smuggling? How much money have you made?
You've the wrong man. You've the wrong man.
I don't have the wrong man.
There's Eugene Hanratty from where?
Mr. Hanratty from Crossmaglen. Can you tell us at all how much money you've made out of fuel smuggling over the years, Mr. Hanratty?
No, I can't count.
Mr. Hanratty, in the premises at Longfield, we've seen vehicles filling up high-ace vans and transit vans. We've seen what's gone into those, Mr. Hanratty? Mr. Hanratty, you've been convicted for ramming customs officers, for assaulting a Garda, for smuggling at different times, but you've never served any jail time. Are you untouchable, Mr. Hanratty? Mr. Hanratty, are you untouchable? Untouchable or just very lucky. A previous oil company he ran from Longfield went bankrupt in 1991. It was forced into liquidation owing €230,000 in unpaid tax. Despite leaving that huge tax bill, and despite having a criminal record for tax offences, he later received a letter from the Revenue Commissioners inviting him to take part in the tax amnesty. The letter offered a special 15% rate for unpaid income tax and capital gains tax, and promised substantial benefits for taxpayers with arrears of tax. The letter concluded, "If any assistance whatsoever is needed, please contact me without delay, and I will be happy to help you." Mr. Hanratty did not take up the offer. Other smugglers are also treated leniently. Primetime looked back over 20 years of court cases covered by the Monaghan-based Northern Standard. Of the 6 oil smuggling cases covered that ended in conviction, nobody was jailed.
If the customs go to the trouble of putting together a good case, it's up to the judges then to administer the law. Until that kind of sharp reaction happens here, these guys are really, the customs are playing up the hill against the gale at this stage.
Like many smugglers, Malachy Malloy operates depots on both sides of the border. Here in Monaghan, and a bigger one in Armagh. Last year, the Assets Recovery Agency, the UK equivalent of the CAB, targeted him, seizing over €2 million worth of property, cash and a fleet of tankers from his headquarters near Armagh City. Interviewed on the back of this apparent success, the Assets Recovery Agency's Alan McQuillan claimed the tide was turning against fuel smugglers.
The heydays of the sort of huge scale smuggling along the border with the Irish Republic are starting to fade. They're not gone yet, but it's going to take some time to deal with it, but it will be greatly reduced over the next few years.
But it didn't seem like much of a victory for the agency when Malachy Malloy finally settled last July. He paid just €300,000, 1/7 of the value of the assets originally seized. 3 months later, at the Malloy depot near Castleblaney, it was like the penalty never happened. We filmed tankers fill up and smuggle fuel across the border, just the same as before. We tailed this tanker, followed it through mid-Ulster and onto a garage at Nuts Corner in Antrim, 60 miles away. Here, the driver delivers the illicit fuel. The smuggle is complete.
The difference in the profit margin is enormous when you look at smuggled fuel to legitimate fuel. Legitimate fuel has a profit margin of around about 2.5 pence, and on smuggled fuel the margin could be 15 to 20 pence. Quite a difference.
Would they tend to know that they're buying smuggled fuel?
If a petrol retailer has been offered petrol or diesel at a price which is underneath the market value, yes, he would know that it is smuggled.
Smuggling is a significant factor in forcing legitimate petrol retailers out of business. Since 1995, the number of forecourts has halved in Northern Ireland. For a struggling garage owner, there is every temptation to join the smuggling bandwagon, and few deterrents not to.
If smuggled or illegitimate fuel is found on a forecourt, that fuel is confiscated and the pumps can be removed. But the pumps can be put back the next day and the tanks refilled with legitimate fuel and they're back in business.
So if you're caught selling even laundered or smuggled fuel, you might lose a day's business, but you can be back in business.
That has happened so often in filling stations and huckster sites that it's unbelievable, yes.
There is not much deterrent either for those who launder diesel, the dirtiest end of fuel fraud. Their raw material is agricultural diesel, which is sold cheaply on condition that it is used for off-road vehicles such as tractors. To distinguish it from regular diesel, it is dyed green in the south and red in the north. Launderers remove the dye by running the fuel through sulfuric acid. That laundered or washed diesel is then sold on as regular diesel. Profit margins are huge. John got involved in fuel laundering when a criminal gang asked him to find a premises. He risked his life to tell Primetime the workings of his trade.
After that, all you need is 2 or 3 of them old tanks, a shed and a series of pipes, putting it through a couple of times in a wee acid drum. Really is very cheap to make. Now, the men who would do the welding would spend a good week welding it all together. But like, sure, it's nothing. The material's very cheap. It's very simple.
Most diesel laundering takes place at night in border areas, and it's transported by day, sold to a ready market.
The main money is going to Republicans, surely. But the Protestants are benefiting big time. We taxi yards getting a delivery every week. Not big money, but very steady. It was cheap. The laundering went on in South Armagh and delivered into Belfast and Derry. It's absolutely cross-community.
We wanted to find out if laundered or diluted diesel is common in Irish forecourts. Using standard testing procedure, we took 40 samples of diesel from pumps around the country, 20 in the north and 20 in the south. The state laboratory analysed them for high sulphur levels, which may indicate that agricultural diesel was added. Fully 12% had readings suggesting the diesel may have been tampered with.
Legal sulphur limit at the moment until 1st of January 2009 is 50 parts per million. So we're obviously on the lookout for oil that is clearly above that level of sulphur. Once it's above that level of sulphur, there should be a question mark about the provenance of the oil.
Our survey focused on regular filling stations, yet 1 in 8 samples was suspect. We didn't include outlets like this one, openly selling illicit diesel in Jonesborough, South Armagh. Here, diesel sells for roughly half the price of a regular filling station.
That's it there, is it? That's it there, is it? It's proper stuff, is it?
Yeah, it's mixed somewhere. And I only walk here. Somebody mixes it up. But it's going a long time now, so it must be good.
Is that right? What's it mixed with?
I don't know, as I said, I don't know. Okay, I don't know.
Right.
Or this fuel site, south of the border in Louth, just off the M1.
I've no ordinary road diesel like at the minute. All I have is the mixed diesel there at the minute, like, you know what I mean?
What's that?
It's the green and the red mixed in and that there, like, it's coming out clear, like. You know, not everybody's cup of tea, but it's 82 cents a litre, like. It's doing the job, you know what I mean? Like, I would say in a van, like,
yeah.
Like if you were going to use in a van, I would advise a 50-50 mix in the van, because van's commercial and they do different tests in commercial vehicles, you know what I mean? But like, to pull you out of a hole, you got the filling station. Once you whack a load of genuine back in on top again, you'd be 100%, you know what I mean? Like, if you had £2 of that and £2 of genuine, you'd be 100%, like.
Only the very gullible would believe that mixing red and green diesel produces regular diesel. And if you're caught with this in your tank, you risk a €3,000 fine. In this Customs Garda checkpoint on the RD Castleblaney Road, 4 motorists were found to be using laundered diesel. Launderers are the only ones to win. They make profits, but local councils have to clean up the sludge launderers leave behind.
We're talking about residues containing hydrochloric acid, sulfuric acid, caustic soda. They would be certainly the most damaging of the laundering agents.
So it's a toxic mess, is it?
It's absolutely toxic mess, yeah.
Take Monaghan County Council, for example. In the course of the last 3 years, they've spent over €1 million in cleaning up after these launderers, both in terms of the sort of sulfuric acid we've talked about, and would you believe also over 150 tonnes a year of cat litter that's also used to wash the dye out of the diesel. So they're left with this clean-up operation for something that they can't control. They haven't got the policy levers to try to stop it, but they're left cleaning up the mess after it.
Like smuggling, those involved in laundering run little risk of tough punishment. Of 60 people convicted in southern courts for serious laundering offences over 4 years to June 2007, only 2 went to jail. Like all the men investigated in this programme, those 2 men jailed were involved in fuel fraud simply to line their own pockets. But for others, the motivation has been political.
Traditionally, fuel smuggling, fuel laundering, were seen as means by which the IRA raised funds in order to, to prosecute its military campaign.
Many believe that IRA involvement in criminality is fading as the peace process blossoms. 2 months ago, however, republicanism and fuel fraud were back under the spotlight when 21-year-old Paul Quinn was beaten to death near the County Monaghan village of Orem. He was killed in a barn occasionally used to store laundered fuel.
It is common knowledge that a number of the people being named in connection with the Paul Quinn murder are wealthy oil smuggling and laundering interests in the South Armagh area.
South Armagh is known for security. It's the best IRA unit in the country. Lost the fewest members. Laundering is the same. A laundering plant is run on army discipline. If you break a code, you are dead.
Is it a paramilitary thing?
In the past it was, yes. Now, I don't know. It's only gangsters making a fortune of money and calling themselves loyalists or provos or whatever they want to call themselves. Just gangsters making a fortune.
In the south, the Criminal Assets Bureau is one of the main weapons in tipping the balance against fuel smugglers. But contrary to popular belief, the CAB focuses not on confiscating the proceeds of crime, but on taxing them. It's a softer option. Those who settle with the CAB are typically taxed at a rate of under 50%, including penalties and interest. In practice, they can keep the rest. Once they settle, they are considered tax compliant.
It seems to me that it enables those same criminals to continue in operation because it legitimises the rest of their assets, which I think is wrong, completely wrong. And it's an effective laundering of those assets for them.
2 of the main operators behind Longfield Oil have settled with the Criminal Assets Bureau. Seamus Duffy finally settled last year for €1.5 million, and just 2 months ago, Eugene Hanratty agreed to pay less than €1 million.
We're all told that crime shouldn't pay, and it certainly shouldn't seem to pay, but it clearly does pay, even with the cab going after you and getting some of your assets from you.
While Eugene Hanratty negotiated terms with the cab in Dublin, business continued uninterrupted at Longfield. Days after his cab settlement, we filmed the smuggling continue. Tankers such as this one, a regular customer at the yard, filled up in Longfield and then crossed the border. We followed this tanker for over 50 miles to a local garage in Carryduff, County Down, where it made its delivery. We later contacted the manager of this garage, but she declined to comment. Hours later, the tanker returned to Longfield to fill up again. Are you aware of a single fuel smuggler who's been put out of business by the state?
Let's say I'm aware of fuel launderers and smugglers that have been the subject of settlements by the cab.
But you're not aware of a major fuel smuggler who's been put out of business?
I'm not.
It's dusk at Longfield. A curtain-sided truck with hidden fuel containers is dropped off at a lay-by for collection later that night. As always, the truck is protected by a scout car. For Longfield Oil, it's business as usual.
Both jurisdictions on this island should have a common rate of fuel duty, and until both sides do that we're never going to deal with this problem effectively.
The reality on the ground, as far as I can see, is that the seizure of assets, by and large, with a few exceptions, simply doesn't happen.
It's very, very wrong that it's been let run for so long, and it's like a running sore, and we have a monumental pain on our backsides at this stage from going into different ministers and pleading with them to do something about it.
I think, to sum it up in a very few words, I've been disgusted with the lack of response. I think we could both speculate on the background in politics as to why they didn't address this. The simple fact is they didn't.
As the authorities both sides of the border look the other way, oil smuggling gangs grow stronger and richer. They continue to operate openly. Experience teaches them that they have little to fear from the courts, the customs, the cab, the taxman. It is they who remain in the driving seat.